Okay, people take a seat. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Let's take a seat. Rajan, let's take a seat. All right. Oh, we should turn off the music as well, maybe? Zach, please. It's like the classroom. Nobody wants to be in front of the classroom. But come on in, take a seat, come forward. Thank you all for joining. There's drink and food in the back if you want some. We're going to get started. I'm Frédéric Rivin, the situation. Oh, hold on one sec. Oh, Matt, are we live? Okay, perfect. I'm Frédéric Rivin, the city of Dashlane. Thank you for all coming. We hope it's interesting. We have two great speakers, Umesh and Rajan, who are going to talk about security topics. And of course, after we can also network and have a bit of food and drink. There'll be a bit of Q&A after each section, so feel free to either raise your hand and ask question. And if you're on Zoom, I'm not sure if we see the people on Zoom, but we'll check the chat and we'll relay the questions as well during the two talks. That's for the Zoom people. If you experience any technical issue, let us know and we'll try to figure it out. This is a scrappy event, so bear with us. And we'll record it anyway, so for the people that couldn't join, and if you want to review the talks afterwards, we'll share it afterwards. So that's the agenda. Welcome. We'll start by Umesh talking about AI agents. Of course, we can't have a security talk these days without talking about AI. For those who were at RSA, we had a big chat about RSA before. That was the big theme of RSA, even though the big theme was the power of community. So technically about humans, but everything was about agents actually. And then Rajan will be talking about auth attacks. And then we can network. All right. Without further ado, Umesh, welcome. I'll let you introduce yourself. I think it's easier for you to do it.
Sure. Hey, thanks everyone. I guess quick intro to me. I'm at Microsoft AI, joined last year after 18 years at Google, where I did a lot of different stuff as you do in 18 years, mostly technical infrastructure, a lot of it like security, privacy, data protection, GCP workspace, Google Assistant for 3 years, totally different direction. And now kind of coming back to that, working on Copilot at Microsoft. So it's a pretty exciting time. And I wanted to kind of share the viewpoint. You know, people build security products. A lot of the focus is on like securing around the product. And that's like super, super important. But I also spend a lot of time thinking about how to make the product itself like behave the way that you actually want it to behave. So that's going to be a little bit more of the focus for this talk. I don't want it to be overly formal, so if you have a question, you could just raise your hand. And I tweaked the slides like till 5 minutes ago, so it is what it is. I also tried AI-ifying them, which I got some stuff was like, oh, that's a way better design than my crappy one. And then some stuff where I'm like, the arrows are going the wrong way and stuff. So, it's still this is I think we have, yeah, we got to refresh this. This is the old slides. There we go. All right, cool. I'm just present from this one. Great. All right, here we go. All right, so this kind of breaks down into like two questions I'm going to address. So the conventional question is, what makes you trust some software? You want to decide if you want to use it, how you want to use it, what makes you trust that thing? And that's definitely relevant for this discussion. But I think the other thing we have started asking ourselves is, what makes you trust a person? Because increasingly, that is how these things are being trained. That's how they're behaving. They're extremely general. They're flexible. There's nuance. You're dealing in natural language. So you kind of have to start shifting your mindset. And so we're going to kind of delve into, what are the implications of that? All right, so yes, of course, security, but I want to talk, in this talk, I'm going to focus on a few things that are maybe you don't hear as much about in this domain, which is value alignment, competence, and judgment, which I think are actually super key things for that underpin trust. And so we're really going to focus more on the novel part. Like, yes, you need all the other stuff. Like, nothing has gone away. It's a purely additive game, right? You still have to get everything else right, but now you have this new space of stuff. So like, okay, coming back to our original question, what's different in the software? So traditional software is like, you kind of know what the control flow looks like. You can literally like read it out of the program, right? You kind of know what the data flow looks like. You can analyze it. It might be complex, but you can kind of figure it out. That's kind of gets thrown out now, right? Like the control flow of the program is like, it's just a loop. It's like gather some information and ask this big brain what it wants to do with it, and then do that thing and then repeat, right? So it's very hard to, really make claims or promises or predictions about what is going to happen or not going to happen. That's just a thing we have to get used to. It's also kind of from a data standpoint, pretty different. It's like, instead of being like clear flows of data, it's really everything in and everything out, right? Like in principle, all the data that's available can go into the one brain and all the things it can do will come out. In reality, only some of those paths might be desirable or wanted or happen. But the reality is like, you can't tell that just from looking at the code. So we need other ways of dealing with it. A lot of conventional security privacy problems are dealt with settings, configs, and toggles. There's still a place for that, right? So you want to probably be able to say, can this thing send any email at all? Am I going to give it that right? You still want that. You need some of that, like hard boundaries. But a lot of the decisions that need to get made are data dependent, right? So it's not really just like, can I send email or not send email? Like, if I ask one of you, like, hey, is it okay if I send an email on your behalf? You'd be like, well, it depends. Who's it to? What's it about? Right? How is it written? What tone is it in? Like, what are the implications of this? Am I committing to something? Like, all these are the things that end up mattering. It's impossible to make configs and toggles for that, right? We should just kind of accept that, right? So we need a different framework for dealing with it that actually anchors on the things that do matter, right? And are extremely dynamic. But what this means is a lot of those things that you want to do are not going to be like directly inspectable pieces of code, because just definitionally, there's just way too much, the space is too large. Can't think of every possible thing that might happen. So the thing where I'm at right now, and this might change if you ask me in 6 months or something, but kind of where we're at is kind of you want some determinism, right? Like if the user says they want something to happen, right? You want some confidence that thing is going to happen. And if you entirely trust the model for that, then it's like very hard to make the promise, right? Because they're just intrinsically non-deterministic. On the other hand, things like, is this email about something that might be sensitive to me? Or, like, am I sending it to a person that I already communicated with before? Or you can imagine like an infinite number of signals, right? Those things actually are exactly the kinds of things models are good at extracting. Right? You can give them context, you can give them the actual text of the email. They can extract signals for you. And they tend to do that more reliably than like adhere to rules and policies. I mean, they might try, but that's like a harder thing to get them to do. It's easier for you to parse the output and be like, oh, well, it gave me the output of a signal. You know for sure if it did it. So that's kind of what we're doing is we're saying, all right, what do we actually want to enforce? And use the model to get the signals, but then you kind of do the enforcement based on the signals in a piece of code. right? Again, we'll see where this goes, but this is kind of like bleeding edge. So that's the thinking. So here's an example. The user's sending a message in a browser session. So, right, so this is like a thing, right? Models can control browsers. It's in the email inbox. It's trying to send something with an attachment. And so, if the user said like, hey, I want you to just check with me anytime that happens, which is a reasonable thing that they might say, or it might be a default that you want in the system. In general, it's like hard to write code that looks at a browser session and can tell when that thing is happening, right? Because it depends like what site you're using to send email, right? You need to actually interpret like visually like what's going on. And so we actually can use the model to be like, okay, I need you to tell me if a message is getting sent. I need you to tell me if the message has an attachment, right? I need you to tell me if the recipient's from a not my domain, all of which are things it could do, right? And then you have a rule, or you want a set of rules that you know are going to be enforced. Not all of them have to be like that. Some of them could be natural language rules. Maybe you really lean into it. But if you want to, at least now you have the option of saying, okay, for sure, I know I checked this thing. Any questions on that stuff? Like kind of just running through it and then trying to leave some time at the end for just like discussion. Good. All right. One other thing I think is not done especially well now is agent identity, right? So even when you think about what do you want to let it do at all, right? You have to kind of give it some entitlements. And we tend to operate right now at one of two poles. So either I'm running Cloud Code on my machine, or like I'm open clawing it and it runs as me and everything I could do, or it runs as a fully managed identity in the cloud, and then I have to go and like individually grant it all those permissions and like whatever system manages those things. And that's very painful, and it doesn't adapt to each user, right? So it's like if I have 100 users and each one actually could do slightly different things, what permission do I give to that box? It's actually, that's not a well-solved problem. So I think what we actually want is something where you could be like, all right, I have this agent, I want to do something for me. One click, give me an identity for that thing, right? And it's gonna be a strong identity, be backed by certificates. It's not API keys or something like OAuth tokens or whatever, like bearer tokens. And I want to be able to delegate what I can do to that thing without having to go all those other permission systems. Like they're just smart enough to know that if I, the person who already had the right, gave it to this agent, that's enough. I think that actually would solve a ton of real world use cases. We just don't have it yet. So this is like, if any of you are working on this thing, just consider it a plea from me to please build that. People will be happy. All right, so we've been talking about systems, but my whole thing at the beginning is agents act like people. So it just raises the question of what would make you trust a person to act on your behalf? So I'd say there's a few elements. The first is value alignment. You need to know that your agent is acting in your best interest and not towards some other end, right? Like, again, just taking the analogy of a person. You hire someone to do something, you need to believe that that's true, otherwise you're going to have a problem. And actually, there's a lot of economics literature on this. It's actually called the principal agent problem, right? So classic is like a real estate agent. Apologies if anyone is like a real estate agent. Where you're trying to sell your house, you're the principal. The real estate agent is your agent. They're acting like representing you. But their incentives are to sell your house as quickly as possible. And your incentive is to sell it for as much money as possible. And those things are in tension, right? So the point is, whenever you have like an incentive misalignment, you have a problem. And so, for example, like the reason that someone's making an agent for you to use is they're trying to achieve AGI. Like maybe they have some other incentives that don't align with yours, right? Or maybe it's like they're trying to steer you to do something. So it's very important that agents have like very, very clear alignment, and that's backed by some kind of promise, right? There's a real world example on the slide. It's actually happened, right? Shohei Ohtani best baseball player in the world, maybe ever. His interpreter was trusted to do a whole lot for him. Makes sense. It's a very tight relationship. The guy's always around. He's managing a lot of stuff on his behalf. He stole, I don't know, like $10 million, like it was some enormous amount of money before he was caught. Right? And that's just, it happens. So this is like a really, really crucial one. And it's hard to verify from the outside. So you kind of have to rely on like legal or contractual or other promises. This one, I think I haven't really heard people talk about, but I think is, again, it's so obvious when you're talking about a human agent, right? You don't let someone do something that you don't trust them to do well, or you shouldn't, right? If you send your kid to the store to like go buy something, you probably don't want to give them like $1,000, right? Because who knows? You don't know if they're good at it. But maybe at one point in the future, if they're really trustworthy and they've shown to be competent and make good decisions and get a good deal on stuff, and you need to buy that expensive camera, like maybe you do it, right? But the point is trust is earned by demonstrating competence over time. And it's this expanding radius of trust. We don't have this for agents really in the first class way that I think we probably should, right? So people building, the best case of this is that the user of the agent isn't the one who has to figure out the hard way what the thing is good at. The best version of this is the people making the agent, they have their evals and they know what it's good at, and it has self-awareness to be like, okay, when I go outside this zone where I know I'm like highly competent, I'm going to start asking for approvals a lot more often, or I might not even agree to do a thing because it's sensitive and I don't feel confident I could do it. Again, just like maybe a person might, if you give them too much responsibility they're not ready for. So what are some elements of this? One is, can they complete a task? Pretty simple. It's a very basic thing of a competence. Quality, did they do it well? Right? You sent someone to go do a thing, and there's better and worse ways to do the thing, right? Speed and cost, do they do it quickly or slowly? Did they spend too much? Right? These are all things you consider. But no negative side effects is a really important one, right? And when you transfer this to the digital domain, you might tell it to complete a task using a browser, and maybe it actually did the thing you wanted. It got the answer, it got the result, but it also, sprayed your passwords all over the internet, right? It technically did the thing, but had all these undesirable side effects, right? And that is also not good. So we need to kind of consider all these together. All right, so this one I think also is going to end up becoming really, really important. One of the things if you actually have someone that you want to trust to work for you, it might be in like a professional context or personal context or whatever, you don't have the time to spell out every contingency of what might happen and what you want and what you need, and like give them like a huge set of rules about what to do, right? You ideally want someone who's starting from a place of very high judgment, lots of common sense, kind of gets it, kind of knows you, they understand how the world works. So in most situations, they can just make the right call, the call you would have made or the call that you would have made if you knew everything. Or in cases where it's like a gray area, they know, okay, well, this is the time I need to go ask. Are you comfortable with this? Is this going to work? Are you okay spending a little bit more for this thing? Whatever the case might be, right? If you start from a much lower place of common sense and judgment, then there's just a lot of ground to make up and a lot of possibility for either error or having to ask continually for clarification because it doesn't understand things. So, my favorite example of this is that the best assistant will save you from yourself, right? It'll be like, you're like, yeah, just send this email, you're in a rush, like do this thing. And it's like, well, hold on. If you do that, like you might ruin the surprise and you might want to think twice about it. That's what a great human assistant would do. So that's what we should be striving to also do, right? I keep coming back to like, hey, when do you ask for approval from the user? That simple thing actually masks. Inside that is where so much of the judgment and common sense are hiding, right? Because the best version of these things, and anyone's used like long-running coding agents, right? Like you want it to really like keep going and like finish a task and not stop, right? Because otherwise you have to keep babysitting it and it's really annoying. You basically need it to have the common sense and judgment of like how to continue through obstacles and errors, but also not do something really bad, right? Because to complete these tasks, you have to give it like pretty non-trivial permission. And so, that thing of like, okay, when do I actually ask the user is actually a pretty big deal. And I think the coding agents today do a pretty crappy job. They ask you all the time, right? And basically, it's like you can only take it for about 5 minutes, and eventually you're like, okay, where's auto? How do I get to autopilot as quickly as possible? I just can't deal with this anymore. And then it'll pretty much just go. And sometimes bad things will happen, right? So it's kind of the worst of both. This is not what you want. If you're doing git status, just do it. Don't ask me, right? But if you're about to go do something really interesting, just pause, maybe ask. That thing isn't deep in there yet. All right, so I guess my claim is that for AI agents to actually become trusted companions, to act on your behalf, they have to do all these things. Probably more stuff, right? But this is like a 20-minute talk. And that's the essence of what it means to rethink security for the age of AI. First, our mental model of what these things needs to be more like other people, not just technical systems, right? Like you instruct them, you guide them so often in natural language. They have this general intelligence, but also makes them unpredictable. And you have to just design for that as first class. And we talked about some ways that we could do that. The next thing is that agents need to earn trust, and it's a progressive process. You show the competence, right? You show the efficiency, and over time, you're like, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more. I'm going to give you a little bit more rope. And I think the systems today, they're not really constructed that way, right? It's like you have to just decide when you want to do something or not do something. You don't really get the feedback loop that you would want. That I think, again, intuitively, if you were dealing with a person, you would just do this thing. You would have a sense in your head of how much you trust the person, what you trust them to do, and what you don't trust them to do. And you would sort of like empower them accordingly, right? And like we need to translate that to this world. And I guess the last thing is don't fight the model. There's like a strong tendency to be like, all right, these things are kind of crazy and dangerous, and we need to like contain them and control them as much as possible. And like I get it, and there's some element of that is true. On the other hand, the reality is like all the stuff around models is quickly getting pulled in by gravity, right? Stuff that you thought you need like this much code to make it do something. Now you need this much, right? Like reasoning used to be entirely outside the model. All you got out of model it was like one turn of completion, right? And like that got sucked in, and more stuff. Tool callings got sucked in. Lots of stuff is getting sucked in, and so you really have to embrace that to some degree, but still find like some way to guide it and put some deterministic guardrails on it, and kind of keep things from getting too crazy. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. Maybe in a year we'll come back and like I'll have all the answers for you guys. That's kind of where we're at. And yeah, thanks for listening, and love to just have a discussion with the group.
What are you seeing out there for those concepts that are starting to be applied or that are going to the direction? Today, to your point that models don't do all that. Are there early needs, early threads of this happening?
I mean, I'm working on it to some degree, right? And I think this comes up even more with general task execution, which we now have in like work copilot in form of cowork, and consumer. There's tasks, which is literally like you get a container and it will go write code and run code to do arbitrary tasks for you, right? So I took my like ugly sides and I ran it through that thing to kind of prettify them. You can see it did like an okay job and I had to clean some of it up, but like, did some cool stuff. That is a case where the more it's long running, the more it has a lot of tools available to it, the more these things come into play, right? Especially because they're going to be unsupervised more of the time. So we're working pretty hard to try to implement a lot of the principles that you saw. I mean, I'm sure others are too, to some degree. Like, Anthropic, you see the settings in Claude. It's like they're starting to evolve to like, okay, I'm not gonna. I have a do everything mode, but I have a mode where I'm like pretty kind of do everything, but maybe not everything. That is kind of where you want to be. And I think it's coming. The question was around the Mythos model. Obviously, the more powerful the thing is, the more you have to be like a little bit cautious, right? What was it? The analogy was like, we don't just like hand out nukes to people, right? Just like because the consequence of someone doing it wrong is too large. I think in the Mythos case, part of it is like it's great marketing. Right. I mean, it's like amazing marketing to be like, we built a model so amazing, we can't let anyone have it. I'm actually trying to get access to it to like find the bugs before everybody else, but they're very carefully guarding the quota, so hopefully we'll get it soon. I think another reason was they probably don't have the GPUs to give it to a lot of people. Speculation. But yeah, I mean, at some point, if something were like that good and didn't have adequate safety guardrails, which so far I don't think anyone's come up with a thing that couldn't be circumvented with sufficient effort. Like, yeah, it's actually pretty dangerous. But on the other hand, there's like buildings in China with thousands of people trying to do that stuff with like very advanced technology, and somehow we're all still here. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe the world is more robust than we thought. I don't know which one to think, honestly. It's like, oh, power plants are running 20-year-old versions of Windows, and yet like we're all kind of okay. So I don't know. All right. Thank you.
We'll do a bit of logistics because Raja needs to plug in, or at least to share. Stop sharing here. You want some power as well? Yeah, it's good.
All right. All right, folks. I am Rajan. I am the VP of Security at a company called Material Security. Let me go into slideshow mode here. And I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about how I woke up one morning and I chose violence because I decided to see how far I could get developing my own malicious OAuth app. And I did this for a couple of reasons. But the primary reason is we're seeing a shift in the attacker landscape where credential theft matters less and less. And the reason it matters less and less is because we're just getting pretty good at like securing accounts. We're getting like MFA, FIDO2 is a thing, right? Like passkeys are a thing. And these are pretty not phishable forms of auth. But also like detecting account takeover, like dwell time that these attackers have is starting to decrease. We're just, that's where we've been focused on for a lot of the past 10 years. And so what I found was that I could build a malicious OAuth app for, basically $0 and in 2 hours. And I did register a domain name that cost me $5. So, I mean, we can throw in the $5 there. This is me. I'm Rajan. I'm, like I said, the VP of Security at Material. Before this, I was a Director of Security at Dropbox for a few years, focusing on data security. And I'm a New Yorker originally. I live on the West Coast now. So I was very happy to have the opportunity to come back out here and do this. But let's start with a demo. Okay, so we have this poor guy, Arjun. Arjun's friend, Lauren, just sent him an email and was like, hey, check out my new app. Up comes this page. There's some trust there. So Arjun's like, yeah, cool. I do want to get my inbox under control. Clicks on here, goes through the test. Now, Arjun does, in fact, have MFA on his account, right? So we're going to go ahead and sorry if that was a competitor's product. It's and now this is the first speed bump that like Arjun gets, right? And the speed bump comes up because Google Cloud allows you to test applications without going through a bunch of security hoops. And the way you can test these applications with sensitive scopes is you just invite someone to participate in your to be like invited into this test. But that invited account gets no notification that they've been invited, right? Like it's just kind of silent to them. So Arjun never got an email saying that, you know, this bad person has invited you to be part of this test. And the other thing here too is like anti-patterns where like they exist on the internet. And so this big back to safety button, like when I click it, I get dumped into like this like wall of text and my human brain is like, I must have just clicked the wrong thing. Fine, whatever. I'm going to go back and like click the right thing because I don't know what this is. And oh, continue. I was supposed to click that. All right. So I click continue. All right. Yeah, you can have my email address. Of course, I'm about to give you all my email. And then this page is super interesting, right? It's asking for some permissions on your like mailbox, some permissions on Drive. That's kind of interesting because the app like said it was a mailbox management tool. Why are you asking for Drive? But whatever, I'm an end user. I just want to get through these pages, so let's keep going. All right, you're all set. Now, what's happened on the back end here is on the attacker's infra, all of Urgent's emails have been dumped into a Google Sheet, right? Just exfil happened immediately. And that is the first thing an attacker would do in case they lose like access. The second thing that's happened now is I have a command and control server, a C2 server, and I can now do things like search in Drive. I have persistent access until someone realizes I'm doing bad stuff and revokes the token. I can look for things like payroll, right, in their Drive. I can go and look at like all of their email and start interacting with it. I can start deleting email and I can compose email, right, which is super interesting if you want to like launch a further attack, right? And then mask like your tracks. So none of this is really good, right? But the point of all of this is like how hard was it to get here? And the answer is not very, right? So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk just like breaking down how all of that worked. Any questions about what I just showed you though, before I keep moving forward here? Okay. And the other thing I will say is like what I'm showing you is like a traditional like data exfil attack. But imagine there was like an agent on the other end of this that was working on behalf of like the attacker, right? Like there's much more that could be done here, right? But that's a much more interesting talk with Umesh one day when we do this again, right? Like how do we stop that from happening, right? Okay, so let's go back into slideshow mode. All right, so I gave you the demo. All right, so here's the stack that this runs off of. You have a GCP project. I did not know this. Also, every free Gmail account out there comes with a GCP instance. Like you just go to like Google's Cloud Console, and there it is, right? And so I used the free tier, no billing, linked to a Gmail account GCP project. I used Cloudflare pages for that phishing lure, that kind of like click here to start the workflow. I used Cloudflare for the persistent access and the data exfil. And then Cloudflare's KV service to store the tokens. And then, of course, you saw everything get dumped into Google Sheets in case that persistent access was lost. So this is the flow, right? Victim comes in, hits workspace pilot.app, which is hosted on Cloudflare. Then there's a handoff to Google's OAuth flow, which then returns back the token to the Cloudflare worker. which stores the refresh token. At this point, there's a ton of access. The victim sees success, so they're happy. But now the worker has access to the Gmail API, the Drive API, and also has the C2 console like running, right? So that's basically how this works. So let's go step by step here. So the lure, this is your inbox finally under control. Connect with Google is what we saw. That is Cloudflare. Why do we use Cloudflare? It's a great CDN. It's a great CDN network, right? Like it's around the world. Cloudflare will mint you a TLS certificate for your site like automatically, right? Again, at no cost. It's got high domain reputation, and it's easy to like deploy to, right? And then the victim saw exactly what I showed you, right? Everything looked like a typical SaaS application doing SaaS application stuff, right? And so like you start to see like a pattern emerging here, which is like, well, if you're a defender, what do you do here? And I'll talk more about that in a second, right? And then the consent screen, right? So like one thing that like cracks me up is like this scope, which I'm about to talk about here, mail.google.com, grants you like God mode access to a mailbox. And yet like the request for that consent is still, yeah. It's to help you rank your mailbox, right? It's like everything else right now, every AI agent that's out there that's trying to, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, you're safe. You're safe. But I would bet that there are people in your life that would, right? That would go ahead and do it. Yeah. Like, so, I mean, if I sent this to my mom, she's owned, right? Immediately, right? Like, that's, and I actually thought about sending it to my parents, and then I thought about trust, and I was like, don't do that. So like this should have like maybe some better copy than like, you know, other OAuth scopes that you're granting, but we can come back to that later. So the consent screen is driven by Google, by this Google Cloud project. It defines, you know, it's where you define the name of the app. It's grabbing the auth from the end user and then handing that off to the Cloudflare worker. It's basically like Google's typical OAuth flow is my point here. Like I did nothing special here, and with a click of a couple of buttons, got, you know, 3 scopes. I would argue that Drive read only is pretty powerful too. You get access to not just like the files that account has, but any shared drives, like those payroll files that I showed you I was searching for were not in the user's account. Well, depending on how you look at account, but they were like created by another person in a shared drive in their organization. That user may not have even known they had access to those files. And in the capture screen, right, that pops up. That's back at Cloudflare. And at this point, what's happened is we've got some tokens in Cloudflare's in the Cloudflare KV, got an instant 200 back to the victim, but in the background, we're still running that exfil, and that thing could just be running several jobbies if it wants to, right? Like it could be doing a whole bunch of stuff in the background. And if the user like closes their browser window, tries to refresh, like it doesn't stop, right? Like, and I'm going to talk about some of the difficulty here in a second of like how hard this is to stop once it started. And so then the steps 4 and 5, right? We had the Gmail exfil, that's using that mail.google.com scope. Drive exfil, the console is just a hidden path on the same worker. So it's the same infrastructure. So even if you're doing like, looking at like, you know, if the attacker's like inside your organization hitting it, like you still won't see it, right? It's a trusted, it's trusted infra. And that full exfil, the mailbox just went to a Google sheet, right? Like it's normal Google API traffic. So why is this hard to defend, right? Every component is chosen to be legitimate infra. Cloudflare's ASN is not going to be on threat intel feeds. Eventually your URL might end up there, right? Your specific like site might end up there, but that's going to take a while. Same with the key vault, like it's Cloudflare infra. And that also makes it easy to clean up after yourself. You can just tear down the namespace and everything's gone, right? It's not ephemeral, but it's pretty close to it. And everything about it will pass like reputation checks. And like try blocking any of this in your environment. You will break the internet for your employees or your end users, right? Yeah, like try doing that, right? And this is everything that I used for this attack, except for that one like URL that they had to go to. And so why don't account takeover controls work here, right? Well, a password reset doesn't revoke tokens. MFA doesn't prevent consent. You saw MFA'd and then granted consent, right? And session revocation is just like password resets. The token is alive, right? And not the MFA token. No, you have to actually pull the OAuth token, right? Yeah. And then detecting this is also hard, right? There is signal. There's absolutely signal, but it's in an ocean of signal, right? And a lot of that signal is false positive. So you would have seen the authorized event, right? You would have seen consent is granted. There's really no way to prioritize that, like what happened could be bad. There's no severity in these in this logging, right? All of that is done by like really good threat detection engineers who are consuming this logging and assigning a severity themselves. The exfil blends into normal traffic. I do a version of this where I pull up like Google's admin console and I show you exactly what it looks like, or just do a call and pull some of the recent like auths. And then to be blunt, most orgs are not looking at this vector of attack right now. It's a control that just is not in place today. So what do you do about it, right? I'm not just don't want to be doom and gloom here. There's a couple of things. First is like alert on new auth grants. I don't recommend building this yourself. There's a lot of companies that will do this for you, but at least get alerted on them and try and get some signal on whether it's good or bad, right? Or from a known vendor or a known third party. Something that's been published by Google is very different than something that's been published by Workspace Pilot.app, right? But the best thing you can do is restrict third-party app access by default, move to an allow list. The reason a lot of organizations don't do this is two reasons. One, there's like a lot of operational overhead. And two, the most unfortunate one is politics, right? Like you have employees who have a lot of power in certain organizations who don't want to be told, well, you have to wait like 2 weeks while the security team reviews this, right? But then if you do want to move to restricting third-party access, think about how you can use an agent to shorten that window of approval to the employee, right? Like try and get them an answer fast. But this is like the thing to do right now. And then go back, review, and clean up OAuth grants. What all of this doesn't do, though, is tell you if an OAuth app has gone rogue. There was the SalesLoft breach that happened, I think, early last year, and it gave attackers persistent access to Gmail for certain companies. Salesforce was impacted. It was pretty bad, and no one was really looking for a change in behavior of the app because it's a hard thing to do. But again, an agent can help you ingest all this stuff, normalize the what the app is doing in your environment, and look for deviations from that, right? And that's it. I moved through this really quickly. I don't even think that was 10 minutes, but $5 and 2 hours, and you can own the world. Yeah, that's it. So anyways, any questions?
That applies to Gmail or?
The Gmail was free. Yeah.
Let's say, Outlook, right?
I haven't done this on Microsoft yet, but it's largely the same. Microsoft has a few more controls. However, their device code is the vector in for this same type of attack. So they do have really good. Microsoft, I think by default has allow listing turned on for certain types of apps. But there is this concept of connecting your app with a third-party service, like a TV or I don't know, some other smart device. And that's the big Achilles heel right now is those device codes, because those aren't blocked by default and can be used. So, and that'll give you the same type of access in. If you'd like, I can do this again with the Microsoft environment. I'm a Google guy, so. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, theoretically you can. So Slack is a little bit better because typically they require admins to allow, they're allow list by default for the most part. But if they're not in an allow list mode, then yeah, 100% you could launch the same attack for sure. Yeah. And then you asked about LinkedIn. LinkedIn's interesting. LinkedIn is actually because they want to be a closed they want their moat to be you have to be a LinkedIn user. they actually make it really hard to like interact with like your account via an API. And the way a lot of companies do it now, like is through like scraping LinkedIn. But they are probably for all of the wrong like motivations, like the hardest one to do this with. Yeah. You mean the OAuth grants, or it's exactly the same grants. It's just what control the admin has, right? So the scopes that Google has today, I would argue, are a bit too broad. And I think this is something that's become more interesting in this world of agents. Like it's really hard to give granular permissions with OAuth scopes today. And what do you like? I want Claude hooked up to my like mailbox for sure. Like that'll make my life easier. But the menu I have to choose like for the OAuth scopes from is not very long, right? But it's the same scopes for consumer as well as commercial accounts. Yeah.
I really like this. Couple thoughts, questions. I think the usability stuff on the off catalog is, I don't know if you've raised it with Google or other companies, but I feel like always been bad.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a mic just in case people are.
Oh, yeah, sure. I think the OAuth UX has always been terrible. And I think you're demonstrating that here in 2026 is just as bad as it ever was. It's a hard problem. And just kind of, I do think about like my parents and stuff being in the situation, and I'll get panicked calls once in a while, and like I think I did a bad thing, but I don't know, right? Where it's almost like you kind of want like to be their security admin a little bit for like really sensitive stuff. So like I would have to approve that grant. You kind of want some of the enterprisey controls for personal, and just for like a million reasons we know like what's not that likely to happen. But that feels like kind of the right thing. Just as one interesting data point, so in Copilot, we do have connectors for email, Drive, calendar, all that kind of stuff. And I basically told the team for the email connector to filter out all the OTPs and all the account reset emails. There's no reason to like, that's just because it's a universal access to your whole life is your inbox. So I really like your push for more granular scopes. I mean, there's probably room for a proxy product, which is like you give it the scopes and then it will actually give you this like really nice menu of filters and choices or something. But anyway.
Working backwards here, huge room for like some sort of proxy, right? That's like sitting there, whether it's an MCP server itself or whatever, but just sitting there kind of like, oh, you're asking for this. And exactly what you were talking about earlier with like the trust piece of it, like you really trust that thing. And then everything else you connect it, you can have like lower trust for, and that's your boundary. I run a personal Google Workspace account, and my parents are on there, and allow listening is turned on for sure. So I'm on the same page as you when it comes to, yeah, like I need more controls for my parents. And I think going off on a little bit of a tangent here, I think geriatric tech care is becoming more and more of a thing. So if anyone has any startup ideas in healthcare that serves people who have aging parents, now is the time to act on it. And I think the scopes thing is going to be an issue for a little while now. And then like the dialogue box is the third point you had, like what are we showing to the end user? That thing hasn't changed in like 10, 15 years, right? And there's so much more that like could be done. Don't even like just have a dialogue box, like maybe have a judgment on like, hey, like, this thing seems super risky. Are you sure you want to do it? It's going to be able to do all this stuff in your mailbox, right? So yeah, agree like on all three of those points. And yeah.
That verification, it's not an unverified app. Didn't seem like severe enough.
Yeah.
Kind of like in Firefox, if you try and this thing it doesn't match, it's like speaks sort of like you showing it really want to do this, and it's like not get around. That feels like small.
Yep.
One that should be off, like has that sort of like the way like the grand stuff. It's like I agree, like the grandmother's gonna go.
Yeah, so the point was the kind of this is a test application unverified app page should have been like more of a red flag there. I agree. I think even with that though, there is a broader industry. I agree 100%, by the way. Like, yes, like that was, or like if you get added to like a test app, like maybe that like verify that you want to be part of this test app first, right? Like, there's a couple of things. Ultimately though, I think people, especially people who are not knowledgeable, can be socially engineered past any sort of screen, right? Which is, like that's a human problem. But I think ultimately that's going to come down to like the scopes are just they're just too coarse. They're too coarse.
That's from like still verified apps, signed apps, and stuff like that. Cost, right? Like there has to be some sort of verification process that comes in.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
right? I agree the grants are too broad. I think people are lazy. They just like go and
Just move through.
nodes will be great.
Yeah. I would even argue that like maybe I shouldn't be allowed to invite people into a test account, right? Like unless I'm a corporate account, right? Like maybe like I can just invite people on my own domain into it, right? Like that might hurt like an independent developer who's trying to do something, but just go sign up for a workspace account then, like
Verified app, like a Drift example that was a legitimate business,
yeah. That's the next thing I want to like work on is showing like legitimate apps going illegitimate because there's two things that could happen, right? The first is app gets sold to some shady data broker in like Eastern Europe, well, okay, in some other country. Sorry, I don't want to pick on a specific area. Or the app gets popped, right? And in both of those cases, like you kind of want a heads up, like something's changed here. Something with like highly privileged access into your environment now has changed, right? Yeah, but imagine that, right? You have to be a company the size of Salesforce with a security team that has the resources that Salesforce gives them to build the right detections to get that. Like most people I know don't work at companies that have those resources. Even the good people I know, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think Google needs to take a bit more action. So I think they're at scale they can probably do.
Yeah. So I have talked to we're recording, right? All right. Let's talk after. I have conversations I can relay to you. Yeah, sorry for those people on Zoom. I can't talk to you about that now. Cool. All right. Thanks very much, folks.
Thanks a lot, Umesh. Thanks a lot, Rajan. Very interesting topics. One we could actually talk about is OAuth in the world of agents, because there's actually a lot of conversation of reusing OAuth as a way to scope the delegation to agents, which I think is going to be interesting and a nightmare, but we'll see. There's food, there's drink. Enjoy, meet and greet each other, introduce yourselves, and enjoy. Thanks a lot for coming.